Welcome to this new automotive news video for Friday, May 22, 2026. And today, for once, we're going to talk about Stellantis. Because yesterday, the group unveiled several new models that will be arriving at several brands. We're going to talk a bit about everything that was announced regarding new models, but we'll focus especially on Fiat, which took the opportunity to unveil several new low-cost SUVs that aim to directly compete with Dacia. Speaking of new releases, we'll also take a quick look at BYD, which has just unveiled a new 7-seater SUV also aimed at competing with European brands, like Range Rover, for example. I hope you'll find these topics interesting. If you do, I count on you to show it by leaving a like and, of course, subscribing for the next videos. For those who are discovering my channel with this video, you should know that I cover car news every day. Be sure to subscribe for future videos, boost this one if you can, and leave a comment with your thoughts on today's news, especially the new Fiat releases. What do you think about it, both in terms of design and competition with Dacia? Do you think it could work? And just before we get into today's topics, I have to quickly talk to you about the LEZs making a comeback. Because unsurprisingly, yesterday, the Constitutional Council decided to cancel their removal. So you should know that the removal of the LEZs was part of a much broader bill that was supposed to simplify economic life in France. The Constitutional Council decided that this measure had no place in that bill, which means there is no actual removal of the LEZs. And in practice, what does that mean? Well, it means that big cities like Paris or Lyon, which have LEZs, will be able to keep enforcing them. But it also means that in big cities where air pollution is quite high, local authorities might be required to set up new LEZs. For the rest of France and the other big cities, well, it will depend on the local authorities. It will more or less depend on the mayors. If they want to set up LEZs, they technically can, and if they don't want to, they won't be required to do so. Let's remember that the municipal political landscape changed a lot in 2026 after the municipal elections, and that many big cities that were previously run by environmentalists who had planned to set up LEZs are no longer run by them. So it might not be the same situation, especially knowing that there are also the presidential elections in 2027, and we know that LEZs are likely to be an argument, or at least a topic for debate, with probably a lot of promises being made and also a lot of promises not kept. But that's another story. We're starting this video by discussing Stellantis again, since yesterday at the end of the Investor Day conference in which Stellantis announced its major strategic plan for 2030, called Fastlane, which we already covered in yesterday's video. At the end of the conference, Stellantis went a bit brand by brand and revealed the future models that will join the lineups of their European brands. There are quite a few new things, but there are also brands that are clearly being left out. For example, Alfa Romeo. The segment on Alfa lasted not even 20 seconds, and above all, it shows that it's kind of the end of passion at Alfa. Because the future models coming to the lineup won't be a true sedan, nor a coupe, nor even a small, passionate sedan. It will definitely be more SUVs. When viewing the different images I'll show you from various Stellantis lineups, keep in mind the models at the bottom are entirely new models. These images don't show facelifts or generations of current models. For example, in the Alfa image at the top, the Stelvio and the Giulia, we know they will have new generations coming around 2027. On the other hand, at the bottom, the new SUV and the new Bottega project, which apparently will be a kind of sporty crossover SUV sold in a limited edition at fairly high prices, are two new models that don't have a name yet and will join the lineup in the coming months and years. In any case, before 2030. So in the long run, we should expect Alfa Romeo to become just an SUV brand, since the Junior and the Tonale are SUVs, the Stelvio is one too, and the Giulia will also become a crossover SUV in the next generation, or at least a raised sedan. A new C-segment SUV and another SUV from the Bottega project are coming, aside from the 33 Straight L supercar, which is sold for a fortune. It's the same story at Maserati. The ambitions aren't crazy, since what's coming by 2030 is just two new models. On the left, a new SUV. We already know it will be the new generation of the Levante. And on the right, a new GT sedan. And we already know it will be the new generation of the Gran Turismo. So we can't really say there are any big surprises or any major ambition to try to turn Maserati around. On the Peugeot side, there are a few more new things. Knowing that, in fact, there will be 7 models coming from Peugeot in 2030, but only 6 of them will be sold in Europe. That's why on the chart here, you only see 6. The 7th is the high-end SUV, which will be above the 5008 and will be based on a platform from the Chinese brand Dongfeng. But it will only be sold in China. 2 new fully electric vehicles in the B segment will debut on the new STLA-1 chassis, which we discussed in yesterday's video. This platform is particularly notable for being extremely modular, meaning that Stellantis and Peugeot will use it to make small, medium, and large cars alike. So here are 2 new electric vehicles, which are probably the new generation of the 208 and 2008, which, as you may have understood, will not be available. Neither as hybrids nor with combustion engines, which means that either Peugeot has gone completely crazy and wants to sacrifice its 2 bestsellers, Or the current 208 and 2008 will still be sold after 2030 with combustion engines. In the C segment, there's a new SUV coming, also based on the STLA-1 platform, which is positioned between the 3008 and the 5008, as well as two versions of the 308, which will be multi-energy, meaning both hybrid and electric. It will probably be the 308 and 308 wagon. And above that, in the D segment, the new large sedan, also based on a Chinese platform, Dongfeng. A kind of shooting brake, which doesn't have a name yet, even though it could be called 608. There's another brand that still has quite a bit of ambition, and that's Fiat. Fiat has announced several new things, including two unusual models. I'll let you judge their design in the comments. The green vehicle in the background on the left is the Quattro Lino, essentially a larger Topolino with 4 seats, which raises questions about fitting 4 people inside. Apparently, it will be a fully electric vehicle and, most importantly, a vehicle you can drive without a license. But above all, in the foreground, there's this thing. What is that? Apparently, it's the new Pandina, or at least its concept. It will most likely be a fully electric car as well, which will fall into the MAE category, the famous category of very small cars with very limited range that have fewer safety standards to comply with. We'll review the technical specs later. Maybe they'll surprise us. Meanwhile, the design really makes you wonder, I'd say. On the other hand, at Fiat, they took advantage of the conference to really unveil a model that's coming very soon. It's the new Grizzly. It's the SUV that Fiat wants to launch to enter the low-cost SUV market and try to compete with Dacia. So it's true that it's becoming quite difficult to understand the lineup structure because, until now, it was mainly Citroën that wanted to become the low-cost brand. And now, it's Fiat. The Grizzly will be sold in 2 different versions. The traditional SUV version and the coupe SUV version called Fastback, which will adopt the design codes that have been imposed on Fiat by the new parent company and will use the technical platform of the Citroën C3 Aircross. Unsurprisingly, under the hood, it gets the same engines as on the C3 Aircross, namely a 100 horsepower gasoline version with the 1-liter PureTech engine, which is now called the 1-liter turbo. This will be the entry-level version, and it will have around 100 horsepower. Above that, there's the hybrid version, also based on the 1.2-liter PureTech, but which produces 145 horsepower in this version. And above that, technically, there will be the electric version, which will use the same batteries as those found in the C3 Aircross. Namely, in the worst case, the small 44 kilowatt-hour battery, which, I remind you, in the C3 Aircross, barely allows for 300 kWLTP. And in the best case, or at least maybe for the high-end Grizzly, the 54 kilowatt-hour battery from the Aircross, which should give it about 400 kilometers of range. So it's not amazing, especially since it's a 400-volt platform, so you can't really count on fast charging. Really fast charging. The real opportunity is the price. If Fiat offers you this SUV at a price lower than the current Duster, or if Fiat offers its fully electric Grizzly at a fairly affordable price, it could get ahead of Dacia, which still doesn't offer a fully electric version of the Duster. We'll have more information about this at the next Paris Motor Show. In the meantime, it's said that Fiat is aiming for an entry-level price around 18,000 to 19,000 euros, which is still slightly below the Duster. To finish, let's talk about BYD, which is unveiling a new 7-seater SUV that will first arrive in England and later in the rest of Europe. An SUV that will directly challenge Land Rover and Range Rover on their own turf. It's called the TI7. Its design is inspired by other traditional 4x4s we already know, like the Defender or the Land Cruiser, with fairly massive straight lines and a lot of angular surfaces. And here too, a spare wheel mounted on the tailgate. This will be the very first SUV from the BYD group to be sold in Europe with the DMP powertrain. You might already be familiar with the DMI. Well, here it's the same thing, except the P stands for performance. The DM engines, which stands for dual motor, are hybrids that can work both as a plug-in hybrid vehicle. That means the wheels are directly connected to the combustion engine. And there's a battery that assists the combustion part, or like an electric vehicle with a range extender, where the car runs fully electric, and the combustion engine generates electricity for the electric motor by producing electricity from gasoline. Even though on the outside it wants to appear quite upscale, mechanically, it's not upscale at all since the base for the combustion engine is a 1.5-liter, turbocharged 4-cylinder gasoline engine assisted by 2 electric motors combined with a 35.6 kilowatt-hour LFP battery. This allows it to go from 0 to 100 in 4.5 seconds and reach 120 km/h in full electric mode before the combustion engine kicks in, either to recharge the batteries or to directly drive the wheels. The entry-level version should be sold for around 60,000 euros, so it's not cheap. But if you look at the price of a Land Cruiser or a Defender, which most of the time are heavily hit hard by the French vehicle tax, well, suddenly, the price looks pretty modest. For your information, this vehicle is also sold in China as a fully electric model with the new BYD Blade 2.0 batteries, which allow it to have almost 1,000 kilometers of range and ultra-fast charging. at 1,500 kilowatt, but we don't know yet if it will be sold in this version in Europe. Still, BYD has looked into the possibility of installing these famous 1,500 kilowatt charging stations in Europe. Except that after various tests, they realized that the French and European networks. More broadly, the electrical grid is simply unable to support such power, since a single 1,500 kilowatt charger alone requires almost as much power as an entire residential neighborhood. That's roughly the equivalent of the instantaneous consumption of 250 homes. So even if it were sold in Europe with that famous battery, the charging times would still be about the same as what you find on most European electric cars. That's it. We've covered today's news. See you tomorrow for the next news video. Meanwhile, like this video, subscribe for more, and consider supporting us by clicking join below. See you tomorrow. Have a great day. Ciao.